Rise to the Top, a book written by TJ Rigg, is available at Amazon.com for only $7.99. Rigg told us about how he wrote his story.
Next part. Okay, my name is TJ Rigg, and
Hi, TJ.
Hi, Chad. And I wrote a book that I called Rise to the Top. I wrote it as part of National Novel Writing Month during last November, and it took me 21 days to do it, and I'm here to tell you how I did so. The whole process started for me on November 4th when I went to the Andover State Bank to visit with my friend Andrea Minoshek, who's the bank teller there. And what I did was I gave her a copy of the Blue Streak that had come out earlier that day, and I dropped it off and I asked her, are we doing anything with our writing group we're in? And she said, probably not, because she's doing NaNoWriMo. And I said, what's that? And so she said, she wrote it down for me and she said, look it up, and so I did. And after reading about it, it basically told me 50,000 words in 30 days, write a novel during the month of November. See you later. And so I was like, okay, I can do this. So right away, I opened up a Word document and I just started going. Like, I had the story in my head, I planned out exactly what would happen, and so I just went along with it, and I wrote the prologue and the first half of the first chapter that day.
TJ had helpers, sophomore Darren Jones, his editor, and senior Alicia Rennick as his career art designer.
At first, this was a solo project. I did not intend for this to be published like a regular book like it was. One of the characters, he eventually became the third protagonist of the book. His name is Darren Thomas in the book. He's based off my good friend Darren Jones, who's a sophomore here at the high school. And we were talking, and I mentioned that his name is in the book, and he said, oh, that's cool. And I told him what he did, and I told him what he was going to do, because I hadn't written the fourth chapter yet, about the big role that Darren Thomas was going to play, I decided. So he said, hey, can I edit your novel? So I said, sure. So on the band trip to San Diego, I had a laptop with me, and I had the novel completed on there, and I had him edited, and he really enjoyed it. That's one of my helpers. Number two, I had Alicia Rennick. She's a senior at the high school, and she's a big artist person, and I have no drawing skills whatsoever. So I said, hey, can you draw me the cover for the book? And she said, sure. Because by then I found out that my dad had, for Christmas, he got me this deal with a publishing company that will print X number of copies of my book, and I can sell it on Amazon. And so when I learned about that, I said, hey, Alicia, can you draw me a cover? And she did. And so she said, sure, what do you need? And I said, I want it to be of Brendan's last day at Top Story. So I sent her that scene, and I told her kind of what I wanted. I told her little specifics about the characters that no one else knows, still don't know. She's the only person who knows about them. Well, sort of, because you can sort of see who they are just by looking at their photos. And so she drew me the cover art, and I looked at it. I approved it right away, and then in April, after my busy schedule finally cleared for a little bit, we threw everything together one last time, made sure everything was perfect the way I wanted it to be, sent it to the printer, and about 5 days later I had 15 copies of the book delivered to me, which I gave out to friends and family, including Darren and Alicia, for their help on the project, and I signed all those copies, and the book is now available on Amazon for $7.99, and I will get a little bit of profit from each of those books I sell.
Jones thought the book was nicely written, except for a few errors, and he was nice enough to explain the story.
I was the editor for his book, and I basically read it through and was doing mainly spelling and grammar and stuff like that, checking, but also just story checking, and I read it, and I gave him my feedback. Just a kid, and he starts out at Andover High, I think it is. I think it's at Andover. I read it a long time ago. But he goes through journalism, and he's really good at it, and he wins awards, and he gets older, and he becomes a news anchor, goes to college, meets a girl, marries her. And then there's like this murder that like goes psycho and starts killing everybody, and his friend Darren, named after me, helps him track him down, and I won't tell anything else because it'll ruin it. Yeah.
Jones summarized the story in 37 seconds, but in this next clip, Rigg will go through every detail about the story.
The basic version of my plot is, in a nutshell, it's the rise to the top of Brendan Hopkins, the main character, in the journalism field. He starts out as sort of this kid who's 10 years old. He sees the media's role in helping solve a murder, and he says, I want to have that same sort of impact on people's lives. And so within the next 3 years, he enters high school, and the high school is very much based on Andover High School, and the advisor is basically Mrs. Kristen Baker, only it's her last name, her maiden name actually is the character's last name, and they're very much the same person. They're just Calloway in the story is just a fictionalized version of Miss Baker. So he goes through high school, he becomes the co-editor of his newspaper, and then he goes on to college. He majors in journalism, is the editor of his college newspaper, is the news director of the broadcast thing there. And then in the third chapter, it's called Top Story. He's been married for a couple of years, and you see his highlights at Top Story, which is a prestigious news outlet in New York City. And his wife is a sex crimes detective. And he, after about 5 years or so, 10 years or so, I believe, they both decide it's in their best interest to move back home to Kansas because his wife, Gail, feels that she can't take the job of being a sex crime detective anymore after seeing her partner almost get killed. So I have his last day at Top Story. I follow the details exactly of what happened that day, and then the story jumps ahead 5 years to chapter 4, which is called New Life, which is a very unassuming title, by the way, because chapter 4 is very much different from the first 3 chapters because it's not so much focusing on Brendan's journalistic career as it is focusing on his involvement in solving another murder spree. And I won't give away any details, but I will say the killer at the end of it is revealed to have a very strong connection to Brendan.
Riggs' hardest part of writing Rise to the Top was making the main character not sound like himself, as told in this next clip.
The hardest part about writing this book? Oh god. Like, the writing process itself wasn't that bad, because I love writing anyway. The hardest part probably have to be, God, I don't even know. Okay. I guess one of the harder things to do was to not make Brendan too much like me, because he is very much based off of me. I call Brendan a fictionalized version of myself. Actually, no, that's not what I call him. I call him a shadowy reflection of myself. And probably the hardest thing to do is not make him too much like me. Like, I definitely threw elements of myself into him, but I didn't want him to be exactly like me.
Riggs' book was published by CreateSpace and was published on April 5th, 2012. It has 138 pages. Riggs is ranked 1,883,365 in Amazon's bestsellers rank.